Hello everyone, welcome to the Cambridge Union. It is an enormous pleasure for myself and for all of us to welcome creator and writer of The Office, all-round funny man, Stephen Merchant.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, they're quite sort of,
yeah. All right.
Welcome to Cambridge.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Cambridge Union. Is this your first time in Cambridge?
This is my first time in the union itself. I did come here a couple of years back to do my stand-up show. And this is where, Cambridge is where I was insulted by a fan. This is where it originated. I was at the cash point, getting some cash. And there was a few people ahead of me, and there was quite a sort of posh chap in front of me, and he sort of glanced around and he saw me and went, I'm aware of who you are. Okay, right, yeah. Enjoyed your work. All right, thanks, yeah. Do you mind if I get a photograph? Fine. So, puts his arm around me, gets his camera out, his phone, fiddling. Just that. Now I'm just stood in the middle of Cambridge with a stranger with his arm around me, just a bloke with his arm around me now. Mm-hmm. He went, "You must hate this," which I've always thought is a weird thing to say, because if you thought I hate it, why are you doing it? I mean, it's not like if you're mugging someone, that's not an excuse, is it? Do you know what I mean? Give me your phone and your wallet, or I'll fucking cut you. You must hate this. But he's saying, so I do the photo with him, and then he says, "Can I get an autograph?" I go, "Fine." So I sign this piece of paper for him, give him to him. And this is why he insulted me. He leans in, he puts his PIN number, but before he puts his PIN number in, he looks back at me, covers it up. Firstly, how bad does he think my career's going that I might be thinking about stealing his cash card? But secondly, how shit a criminal am I supposed to be that before I commit the crime, I have my photo taken at the scene of the crime with the victim? And I was thinking, it's like, so he's going to go to a policeman and go, "I've just been mugged. Can you give us a description?" I got a picture of him. Well, if only we knew his name. He wrote it down for me. So that was my abiding memory of Cambridge.
So hopefully this visit will go better than that.
Yeah, we'll go better than that. Yeah.
So just to sort of start off at the very beginning, where did you decide that you wanted to be a comedian? Were you funny at school, or? Marginally.
I was always a big fan of comedy as an enthusiast first, and I for many years I was very keen to come to Cambridge itself because of the Footlights Review, obviously, and I was a big fan of Monty Python and Peter Cook and all those people that had come here, and I was always very keen on that idea, and I would talk to my teachers about it, and that I'd like to come to Cambridge so I could be in the Footlights, and my teachers were like, "No, you're not going to get into Cambridge, so just don't bother." And I'd say, "What do you mean?" They go, "Well, you need you'll need 3 A's at A level and stuff, and you're not going to get it." And I was, okay. So I never applied to Cambridge, and then I got 3 A's in my A level, and it was a real, it was a great frustration to me and a great annoyance, and I always felt like I missed out, in not being able to come. But equally at the same time, I was always very inspired by the fact that people like John Cleese, who had come here, he'd grown up in Weston-super-Mare, which is near Bristol, where I'm from, and he'd gone to a school in Bristol, and he was very tall and gangly, and I just, for some reason, I just thought, maybe if he could do it, maybe I'll give it a throw, and I just, for some weird reason, it never occurred to me that I shouldn't give it a stab. And I think everything else, like in my school, I just went to this comprehensive, and they just, like with Cambridge, they just shot you down. Like every port of call, you'd say, "I want to go to Cambridge." No, it's not going to happen. No, go to a polytechnic. Be happy with it. Or, you'd like to be a comedian. No, get a job down the NatWest. What are you talking about? That was just the sort of general ethos of my school. And for whatever weird, arrogant reason, I just thought, no, I'm going to try and do comedy. And I did enough, and it worked out.
So you spoke briefly about sort of John Cleese and Monty Python.
Yeah.
Do you sort of see them as your inspiration in comedy? I don't know, do you see sort of different schools of stand-up comedy, and where would you sort of see yourself in those sort of different schools kind of thing?
I was a big fan of John Cleese in particularly, and Foley Towers and Monty Python, and before that, kind of old black and white comedy like Laurel and Hardy and Bob Hope, and then later people like Woody Allen, and so I was just a fan. Like, that was my thing. I was just a fan, and I just liked that. It made me laugh, and I just whatever. I was kind of obsessed, and I would record things like Blackadder off TV and transcribe it to try and figure out how the jokes worked. I was like a comedy nerd. This is going to come as a shock to people, but I was something of a nerd in school. And so it just at some point I thought, well, maybe I should. Oh, I remember what it was. I did a play at school called Come On Everybody. It was before they did all those, those jukebox musicals they do now, where they have things like We Will Rock You, and it's the songs of Queen, and they make a musical about it, or the ABBA one, Mamma Mia. My teacher came up with that idea, basically, and it was all these rock and roll songs, and I played a comedy vicar in the show, and it was the first time I'd been on stage, and every night I had to announce the winners of a dance contest, and I had to sort of get this envelope out and open it, and I'd say, and the winner is Jeff and Marjorie, or whatever the thing was. And then I was very young, so bear with me, but I thought this was hysterical, that every night I'd get a list and I would say, so on the first night I saw open it, and the winners are a loaf of bread, 3 pints of milk. I'm sorry, it's my wife's shopping list. Huge laughs from, not from here, but from the people in my school, from parents, basically, where anything even resembling a joke got rapturous standing ovation. And I thought, this is good. And every night I would sort of change the list, and it would be, one night it said, and the winner is a box of condoms. Unbelievable, outrageous. And I went back in the sort of dressing room, and this teacher came in, whose idea it was, and she was furious. Where's Steve? And I just thought, rock and roll. That's what we do, all right? And so I just, and so I got that kick of kind of thinking like, this is exciting and this is fun. And so it was the sort of combination of being a comedy fan and then having that little taste of being on stage and thinking, put those two together.
And then sort of, I think a lot of us know you. Our first sort of meeting was through The Office. You wrote The Office. You weren't in that. You didn't sort of appear in that. Did you feel that it was hard for sort of somebody else to be sort of reading your jokes out, or did you quite like the transition to writing comedy?
Not really. I mean, my aspiration at that point was to do a sitcom that would be as well regarded in the dream world as something like Foley Towers, or mean as much to a very small audience as that did to me. And by the time that show was being written and we were making it, it didn't really occur to me about being in it. I was just swept along with the momentum that we were making anything, and that they were giving us money to do it, and that we were writing it and directing it and producing it, and Ricky was in it. The idea that, I wasn't really thinking, oh, damn, I need to get into it as well. And it was only later when I saw basically all the free shit that Ricky got sent. Because apparently if you're on TV, they just send you stuff. They just send you crates of beer or iPods or, just whatever is iPods. That dates it. Yeah, who has an iPod now? But just free stuff. You just get sent free stuff. And I used to see this free stuff arriving for Ricky and just be angry that I hadn't put myself in it. And so when we did extras, I was like, I'm going to be in this. And then they never really sent me free stuff, which annoyed me. I think they were still sending it to Ricky. They were using up their quota on him. But that was the main motivation to be in it. And also just because I was around when we were writing extras, and it was like I was a resource. And so, why cast an actor when you could stick me in the show? And that was easier,
And then sort of since then, you've done a lot, and we'll sort of come back to that. But you're now in America.
Right.
You've moved to America. In America, they've sort of... I was always brought up with the understanding that we have our own sense of humour and they have their own sense of humour, and they don't really understand the British sense of humour.
Right.
Have you felt that you've had to adapt, or did they come looking for you because they liked your sort of quintessential sort of socially awkward British sort of sense of humour?
Well, I don't think I wouldn't say I've moved to America. I do spend a lot of time there, but I still come back and forth all the time, and I'm working on a project here at the moment. So I don't think I've moved there. But what's nice about America, what's particularly nice about Los Angeles is that it's populated by other comedy nerds like me, who went there from all pockets of the world to write comedy. And there's sort of a big infrastructure. And when you're there, you just meet a lot of people who share the same passion. And it's very seductive because, in London, you have to really seek them out because, of course, London's a city full of all kinds of industry. But Hollywood really is just films and TV. And so there's something nice about that and working with people that are as passionate as you are and as knowledgeable and as experienced. And so that's what's enjoyable. There is a different sense of humour, and it took me a while to realise that. I do think they are more generally optimistic than we are. There was a show when I was growing up that I was a big fan of called Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, about two guys approaching middle age in the sort of north of England whose lives were sort of going nowhere. And this was a sitcom, this was a comedy show, a smash hit comedy show, and the opening theme tune, the lyrics were something like, "Oh, what happened to you? Whatever happened to me? What became of the people we used to be?" Like, it was that bleak. That was the opening credits of the show. And when you think of a show like, in America, like Friends, I'll be there for you, shoot for the stars. And that, I think, is a big contrast between British humour and American humour. They are more optimistic. I go back to Bristol, and people will say to me affectionately, "All right, you wanker? Steve, you lanky twat, good to see you." If you went to America and said that, "Hey, you fat douche, you'd never work again." So there's definitely a weird sort of British, I don't know whether it's a cynicism or a sort of level-headedness or whatever, but that certainly is a difference, and that's something you have to sort of juggle.
But the Hello Ladies sort of character and show that you've taken over there, first of all, is that based on real experience? Are you really like that with women?
I mean, look at me. Of course not. I am an absolute player, all right? And I could teach you a lot, and I'm sure you've got a lot of questions about how to talk to ladies, how to undress ladies.
I mean, do you have any advice to impart, or?
Any advice to impart? Don't be scared of the opposite sex. Took me many, many years to realise that they're as scared as you are. Like, if you see a bear or whatever in the woods, they're as scared as you. Are they actually? I'm not sure if bears are as scared as you. But like with bears, if you're confronted by a member of the opposite sex, make yourself look as big as possible. Roll on the ground, play dead. This is not working, this analogy. But there's not a day goes by that I don't think I wish I could go back in time and give instruction to my younger self, to my 20.
I mean, are there any sort of?
You're really desperate for this advice.
Are there any experiences thinking about like your younger self that you just sort of go?
I think it was that thing. It's the Groucho Marx joke that Woody Allen then did in Annie Hall that is the classic joke, which is that I don't want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member. And there's that fear, I think, when you're young, that not everyone, but certain people, that you don't understand why you're desirable to the opposite sex. And so perhaps you're too modest, or you're too self-deprecating, or you lack that confidence, and that you sort of think somehow you're unworthy, or that you're too much in competition with other men or women. And then as you get older, you realize that almost everyone else is an asshole. And if you're not an asshole, you're already a step above everyone else. And that you just, that actually, if you speak to someone, they're not going to punch you in the face or run and tell everyone or laugh about you behind your back, or if they do, who cares? It was all that stuff. It was all the obvious stuff, which I'm sure everyone knows. For some reason, I didn't know this. I had no older brothers to tell me, or my father certainly never gave me any sex advice. The only advice my father ever gave me about biology, as I recall, was milk, lemonade, round the corner chocolate's made, which is not useful in a sexual situation. He was of no help to me, and so I still feel like I'm sort of piecing it together as we go, really. But you know, and for a while I had some good chat-up lines. Would you like to meet Ricky Gervais? That worked. That worked for a while. You know, and so, yeah, so the show, in a sense, and the Hello Ladies stuff and all the stuff about dating really was born of me thinking back to that period of myself, my late teens, my early 20s, and that sense of discomfort and that sense of sort of not understanding the rules and sort of overthinking everything, trying so hard to present yourself as a version that you wish you were, as opposed to the real person that you are. And all of that sort of stuff, it just seemed to me very rich for comedy. And because to me, comedy is really funny when there are stakes, you know, when the person really wants something. You know, like talking about John Cleese in Foley Towers, you know, he's a hotelier and he wants this hotel to be the best hotel, and he wants to be considered the sort of the great man of his community, you know, who's smart and has the best evenings of fine dining and whatever. And of course, the reality is he's not that person. And so, you know, he wants all that. And so every time he undermines it or it falls apart, it's somehow funnier because it means more to him, you know? And so that's what I like about dating, because as a comedy subject, because you know what the rule, like you know what both people are thinking, and that's the irony of it. When you go on a date, you both know what the plan is. You know, you have to pretend that you don't want to have sex with the other person. You know, you can't just come straight in and go, "Oh, are you interested, or should we go back to mine?" You're not. You got to play sort of rules. You got to buy meals and so on or whatever. Go to the cinema, blah blah blah. And you know, but that's so everyone knows what the equation is. And so I just like the fact that there's sort of stakes, there's jeopardy. You know.
And before we sort of pass over to the audience, you've just finished a play in the West End called The Mentalist.
Yeah.
It was something different for you. It was sort of darker comedy. I think it was your first West End performance.
Yeah.
Was it something that you enjoyed?
No. No, hated it. Never do a play.
Right.
Is my advice. The rehearsal period was fascinating. And I did learn a lot. One of the reasons I wanted to do it was because I wanted the discipline of having to do proper acting, to really learn the script, not be able to change the words like you do when you get to write your own stuff. Having to learn, you know, that whole thing and to do it every night and to have the discipline of an actor. And I enjoyed all the rehearsal. And then once we started doing it every night, it was miserable. I mean, it's stupid. I don't know why can't we change the words? It doesn't make any sense. I said those last night. Why am I saying them again tonight? I was tired to do it 8 shows a week. It was crazy. It was absurd. And so learned a lot about acting. Never want to do it again. 2 weeks in, I was exhausted. My own mother said, "Steve, you look grey." That was her word. Thanks, Mum. Yeah, I found it very, very difficult. And I couldn't really quite understand why actors love acting so much. And I realized that actually my real passion is the writing, and that the acting is a sort of nice part of it and a nice hobby, but it's not the main thing.
The character you played, I think you described it as a right-wing, slightly awkward, reactionary character.
Yes.
And that sort of just makes me think, you spend a lot of time in America. I don't know if you've seen the latest Donald Trump video, the sort of USA. Have you?
What's he doing? No, I haven't seen him of late. What's he up to now?
He ripped off the Go Compare advert and did a song about freedom in USA. And I just want to know, you know, he's now the funny man in America. What are your views on Trump? Do you have views on Trump?
Jeez, I mean, it's extraordinary. The man. It's almost too easy to dismiss him as a moron, because he's not, is he? He's somehow smarter than that. He has figured out what to say to appeal to some angry, terrified, paranoid mob, and he's pursuing it. As far as I can tell, someone told me that he talks about being a self-made man, but he got given several $1 million by his dad to go into investment when he was young. And he talks about how he's a great, great businessman. But apparently, if he had just put that money that he was given by his dad in like a kind of, in sort of a good investment account, he would be twice as wealthy as he is now. Because in actual fact, all his wheeler dealing has meant that he's been bankrupt about 3 times. And yet, somehow, he has managed to persuade the Americans that, or a portion of them, not all of them, that he's the man for the job. And it is terrifying. But that's the weird thing when you go there, that the polar opposites, left and right, are so extreme. And I think there used to be a feeling in early America, you know, that the heroes were these great thinkers, right? The founding fathers of America were the great men of their age. They were kind of Enlightenment thinkers who were inventors and, you know, and philosophers, and they were writing kind of, you know, pamphlets. And now you have people like Trump and, you know, and you have Sarah Palin. I mean, I forget which one of the first presidents could speak about 8 languages. I mean, I'm not even sure that Sarah Palin can speak English. I'm not even sure she's seen a foreign film with subtitles. I mean, it's extraordinary. And so there is this sort of weird anti-intellectualism. There's this idea that because Trump's kind of shooting from the hip, that he's the man, you know, right? Because he can take on Putin. To do what? To arm wrestle? I mean, it doesn't. It's scary. But I think we should rest assured that he probably won't become president of the United States. So don't worry.
Well, on that note, there are lots of people here who are adoring fans and have lots of questions for you.
Sure.
So we are going to open it up now to the audience. If people raise their hands and just wait for a microphone to reach them. So does anyone have any questions? I think we've got one here just at the front.
Thanks very much for being here. 2 questions, if that's all right. The first related to your previous question. Even if Trump doesn't become president, are you worried that with Sarah Palin's endorsement being in the public eye, stand-up comics are going to be redundant for the next 18 months or so? And secondly, have you ever bombed, and if so, how badly, and can you tell us about it, please?
There's a lot of Trump-related questions this evening. Am I worried? No, I mean, if he gets in, then he's grist to the mill, isn't he? I mean, everything he says is just kind of extraordinary. I mean, he flip-flops on every political issue. I think that's one of the reasons why satire shows here, they've tried them, haven't they, periodically, you know, like the 11 o'clock show, which is where Ricky got his break, and that more recent one on Channel 4. And I think the problem with England is that we're generally fairly reasonable. I mean, even left and right, we're relatively reasonable, relatively civilized, much less easy to satirize and to spoof. In America, I mean, it's not just Trump. I mean, it just runs so deep. The sheer vast size of that country means there are so many, and I'm going to use the word fuckwits, in positions of power. This is not on the web or anything, is it? There's no Americans internet. There's no way that information will ever spread to America.
In the audience, yeah. But yeah.
I don't look. You're at Cambridge. You're not a fuckwit. Right? You've had the good sense to come here. What I mean is, there's a lot of fuckwits in positions of power, and so it's much easier to satirize. I think here it is tougher. So I think Trump is just, you know, he's going to write comedians material for them, certainly. The other question was about bombing. Yes, I did bomb once terribly in Exeter. I used to have, when I first started doing stand-up, I had this shtick where the joke was that I would come out and I would pretend that I was this sort of really arrogant comedian from the West Country that I thought was really famous in my own neck of the woods, but that no one else obviously had ever heard of. So I'd come out and be like, all right, how's it going? All right, I'll do some jokes. Yeah, you're giving me attitude straight away, and I don't like the look of you. And I'll come on again, and I'd go off and I'd come back and I'd do a joke, and then it would bomb, and then I go, all right, and I'd sort of attack the audience. And they understood. Most audiences understood that it was just a character, and that you know it was not to be taken seriously, and they would enjoy it for what it was. But if the audience was, and I'm going to use the word fuckwits, they didn't realise that I wasn't an arrogant comedian from the West Country, and so in Exeter once in the West Country, I did this routine, and they just blank, just no idea. A room very much the same size as this, not a single person except the waitress understood it was a joke. And because I didn't have an act, I couldn't fall back on that. I just had to keep going with this like meta act. And of course, just kept digging myself a hole. I had one joke, I had one proper joke that was supposed to be a bad joke, which was, you know, Pringles, the crisps, Pringles. You know how the caption is, once you pop, you can't stop, right? So like you take the lid off, and they're so Moorish, you just have to eat the whole tube. That was the joke, right? That's the thing, right? You can't stop. Once you pop, you can't stop. And my observation was, if that's true, why is there a resealable lid? right? It was supposed to be a bad joke. I mean, it wasn't. I have never heard anger like it. I mean, they were furious. I mean, you think it was bad. There was hate. And someone actually shouted, "Taxi for the comedian," which I thought was just a myth. I didn't think anyone actually ever said that. And what was weird was you realize that if you're bombing, you think it's going to be the worst thing in the world. And then you realize, it's fine. I don't know these people. They don't know me. I'm going to leave in a minute. It's going to be a bit awkward walking to the car park. But then I'll go home. And I did. And it was sort of strange. It was like a weird kind of, it sort of gave you made you a bit bulletproof for future shows. So I'm glad I bombed really, because it made me a bit tougher. But it's not a pleasant experience.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, we've got one at the top. Who comes with his own microphone?
Yeah. Have you ever been approached by Valve to do Portal 3? If not, would you be interested in doing it? As Wheatley, of course.
I was talking earlier about nerds. Well, for those of you that aren't a nerd, I did a voice for a video game called Portal 2, and that was one of the most exhausting things I've ever done, because what I didn't realize when you do a video game, I should have, is of course you don't just do the voice for the story, you have to do the voice for every possible avenue that you could go down in the game. So you're just in a recording booth for what felt like weeks, just shouting down sort of imaginary gantries. Run! Yeah! On forever. And just exhausting, voice was ruined, had no concept of what was going on in the game, they hadn't made the game. Just it was the weirdest experience. And then the game came out. Turned out it was very popular. People liked it. I haven't played it, but apparently it was because I'm not a nerd anymore. And I was nominated for an award for best voice of a game, and guess who I lost to? Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill, the actual Mark Hamill.
Who was coming here in a couple of
weeks.
weeks.
There you are.
Yeah.
We'll bring this up with him. So yeah, I lost out to a Jedi. You can't beat a Jedi. That was never fair. But they haven't approached me about the third one. But given the exhaustion of the last one, I would have to give it some thought, because it was knackering.
Yeah, just here.
Hi, on extras and like Life's Too Short, did the sort of improvisational, changing the words stuff jar with any of the established actors? And did anyone say no to appearing on the show?
Did anyone say no? Generally, they said no if they weren't available. I think Keith Harris, who was a ventriloquist, who used to have a green puppet called Orville. You're not familiar, probably too young, but he was very popular when I was growing up. We asked him to be in it. He read the script and said it was depraved filth. So we got Keith Chegwin to do that role. He doesn't mind a bit of depraved filth. He said no. I think, again, someone you may not remember, there was a double act called Little and Large. One was little and one was large. That was almost the entire joke of their act. Sid Little, not his real name, he said no, but he was much more civilized. He just said he was very religious and it didn't kind of chime with his views. So Keith Chegwin stepped in for that. I remember Ross Kemp very generously did the show. Ross Kemp was very sweet and did the show, and that was lovely. But we did have a joke where we kept on comparing Ross Kemp to Zippy from the kids' TV show Rainbow, which again, you may not remember, but he's kind of, Zippy was kind of a spherically shaped kind of puppet with a big grin and a kind of zip for a mouth. And if you look at Ross Kemp, he does look a bit like Zippy. And so he was a bit jumpy about that. He said, well, they'll keep shouting at me when I go to the football. Oi, Zippy. And we said, I understand, Ross. So what we did was we recorded the references to him looking like Zippy behind his back. And then I remember we were trying to get a long camera shot of him, because Zippy always used to do this. George. So we were trying to get Ross Kemp to do that, which is quite a hard thing. to to persuade someone to do from a distance. Ross, could you just imagine that you're sort of playing a very small piano on your face? And I think he rumbled after a while what we were trying to do, so we never got that. But that was fair enough. He said he didn't want to do it. Who else? Kate Winslet did almost everything that we asked of her. The only thing she felt uncomfortable, she didn't want to say. In fact, I'm not even going to say the line because it was too depraved. But there was one line she didn't want to say, which I completely understand. I forget. It was something like, she was wearing a nun's habit, and she was supposed to say something like, "I'm sweating like a child molester," or something like that. Anyway, she didn't want to say it, which is fair enough. But no, generally people were very collaborative. It was, and we never stitched them up. We never really tried to kind of catch them out.
I mean, you sort of said then that there was a line which was so depraved, you understand. Do you ever think that there is a line in comedy which cannot be sort of crossed, that there are taboos that are just not to be sort of made fun of?
I do, but I think it's about the way you approach it. I think it's about what your agenda is. You know, I think I wouldn't like to see sort of censorship in comedy, and I think increasingly I do feel in the years since I've been working in comedy that it has become tougher, and I do think there's more of a sort of a policing of comedy, and I think you see it a lot on Twitter, and you see it a lot in the sort of, you know, the kind of various opinion pieces you read online and in newspapers, people trying to attack comedians and writers generally for things which they perhaps don't agree with. And I think that's dangerous, because I think what that's almost about is sort of saying, yes, you can make jokes providing I agree with them, you know. And I think comedy should be allowed to be edgy, and it should be allowed to go into areas that you don't feel comfortable necessarily. And, you know, when we were doing extras, we did jokes about people with disabilities, or we did jokes about race and so on, but they were never about making fun of someone with disability. They were about playing with people's attitudes and discomfort around issues of disability. It was the same thing in the office. Or playing with, you know, discomfort that, you know, that some sort of white middle class people have around people of color, or whatever it might be. And that to me seems like a rich area of satire. But the problem is that it, on the surface, can seem like you are mocking the person in the wheelchair or whatever, as opposed to the person who's uncomfortable around them. And so, you know, it's tricky. It's a dangerous area, and you do tiptoe around it. But I do think the problem is if you come down on everyone as soon as they go into that territory, you just stifle creativity, you stifle conversation, you stifle. And you know, sometimes it's good to hear the opposing voice. It's good to hear the stuff that you don't want to hear, because otherwise you're pushing it into corners. You know, you're keeping it under lock and key, and I just don't think that's healthy. And I know, you know, somewhere like this is all about debate and about free speech, and I just think it's tricky. It's tricky when you start to sit from a high and tell the world what they should say and what's allowed and what's permissible. You know, it's tricky.
Yeah, just there in the stripy top. Is anybody with a microphone? Oh, it's going all the way back.
Big fan, by the way. I just wanted to know what it was like to work with Karl Pilkington. Like, is he really... Some of the things he comes out with, are they really... Like, is he like that in real life?
Right.
Fantastic.
That's probably
fantastic question.
That's the question I get asked the most from any person anywhere in the globe. I was in Vietnam and someone asked me that. Which
Is that upsetting when people sort of ask about somebody?
No. I'm more than happy to answer it. Karl is that. Yes, he is like that. He is one of the most unique beings I've ever met. It's odd because he does have a strange sort of intelligence. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's like he's weirdly perceptive about people, and he is quite good at gauging people. He's very good at that. He's just, and he would admit this, he's just, I'm going to use the word fuckwit. No, he's not a fuckwit. He's what he is he's uneducated, he's ill-educated, he's poorly educated, so he just doesn't have a huge sphere of reference. And so that was the thing when we first were on the radio with him. He was given to us to press the buttons and play the records when we were on the radio. And we started asking him questions I forget exactly what the first question. Well, I remember early on he said something like, "What were the things in that film Gremlins called?" Gremlins, Carl. And I remember we were talking once about how there were certain famous people that were only famous because their father was famous, like Bianca Gascoigne, Paul Gascoigne's daughter, or George Best's son, Callum Best. And Carl said, well, you could say the same about Jesus. So he does sort of, on occasion, he hits upon kind of moments of genius. And then he'll just say, you know, weird things like, you know, you never see an old person eating a Twix. Okay, I guess. I was walking here today and I saw a bumblebee have a heart attack. Can you be sure of that, Carl? Can you be certain he had a heart attack? So he just, what we realized was he was this untapped well of greatness. You know, he just could just keep on asking him any question, and yet it was strange because when we were filming An Idiot Abroad, we would watch the rushes, and there was one where he visited Jerusalem, and he was looking at the wall between the two sides, and he wasn't making jokes he was just saying it. He just was like, it's depressing. Why is the wall there? It's just sad. And it was weirdly touching and moving, you know. It's like from the mouths of idiots comes kind of wise words and profound words. And it was genuinely touching. And then he said something stupid. And I laughed. So yeah, and now of course he's doing his show, The Moaning of Life, which you'll notice Ricky and I aren't involved with. We're all good friends with Carl. It's just he realised that he doesn't need to share the money with us, and so he's doing his own thing now. But he's extraordinary. He's another dimension.
We'll go for just at the front here.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for being here. Massive
for having
fan. I was just wondering, as an aspiring comedy writer, and I'm sure lots of us here are as well, what's your process for writing and coming up with the funnies? And particularly when you're collaborating with someone, and that someone's, Ricky Gervais, what did you do when were you just like locked in a room and you wouldn't leave until you'd done a quota of pages? Or, yeah, I'm just really interested. Cheers.
Well, collaboration is definitely very helpful, particularly when you're starting, because it means you have that automatic sounding board, because it's very hard writing, particularly comedy, in sort of a vacuum and just relying on yourself to figure out what's funny. Certainly when you have someone else, if they laugh, then you probably means it's funny. We spent a lot of time early on just discussing what we liked and disliked, not just in comedy, but in all kinds of walks of life, music, in terms of films, in terms of our political views, our social views, because the more you sort of understand that other person, the more that helps, I think. And I think you realize there's such a great crossover of shared opinion. So much of what we did early on was about that, establishing, I guess, what our taste was, so that when we went to write together, we sort of were on the same page in terms of what we wanted it to be and what we aspired to. And then we sort of set rules, like we would never allow something in the script that the other person wasn't happy with, So even as Ricky became famous, he couldn't sort of just demand that we did a joke because he was on TV. So sort of setting those parameters were really good early on. But I think particularly if you're here and you have the freedom to get your stuff staged in some form or another, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of ways of doing that aside from the Footlights review. I'm sure there's ways of doing it now, of course, as well. Filming things with iPhones and digital editing equipment is so easy. All the stuff that we didn't have when I was at college. You'll never have a better time than when you're at college or university. You'll never have more freedom. You'll never have more sort of willing collaborators. You'll never have more free time. And so this is the perfect time to be. You won't. And I know you think, oh yeah, I'm doing my studies. No, you're fucking not. You're in the bar, all right? And instead of being in the bar all the time, you could actually go and you could make something, you could stage something, you could write something. And it's a great opportunity to do that. And as soon as you get out into the real universe, the world kind of just squeezes in on you. And so it's much harder to find a stage to perform. It's much harder to find performers that will do your stuff. And And so, but I do think it's all about writing and getting it read aloud, getting it performed, hearing what it sounds like, seeing how it plays in front of an audience, hearing it bomb in Exeter, so that you have to think, why did it not work? All of that stuff, like there's nothing more valuable than that, and that you can kind of keep tinkering and you can worry about the font and and what the layout is and what agent you should send it to, and that's all secondary stuff. It has to be. Get it read, get it performed, get it heard, learn from that. That's the best advice I can give.
Yeah, just at the back there, in the blue jumper, we'll go for.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your talk. Within characters of The Office, the US, and then kind of extras, these characters like Barry or Toby were kind of routinely hated on as in a sense. I just wondered what those characters have in the position and what they why people love to see them get routinely hated on.
To see the characters that are sort of bullied and humiliated. Well, I mean, I think in a way, in the characters that you've mentioned there, I mean, they're sort of idiots, sort of bullied or led by idiots, right? So it's sort of no one's really in a real position of power. I mean, everyone's in all of those shows are sort of bullied in some way, I mean, so in Extras, Ricky's character is bullied from the kind of people above him, and then he kind of bullies me, and then I bully Barry. It's all handed down. I think so much of comedy is about sort of being able to explore the areas that you can in real life, and turn things which could seem tragic into something comic, and often tragicomic, and I think with Extras, what we were trying to tap into was that anxiety about this culture which so many people crave celebrity, and we experienced it as soon as we had some success. You would just be surrounded by people that were just itching to be in the celebrity universe, and it used to be that you'd ask a kid, what do they aspire to be, and it would be a scientist or an astronaut or whatever, and increasingly now the result is I want to be famous. Not for anything in particular, just famous. And, and our note from the time that we've spent around celebrities or in these showbiz worlds is that, it doesn't solve the problems. It doesn't make you suddenly a smash hit with the ladies or suddenly resolve whatever personal demons you had, they're all there, they all remain. And so I guess for me, it's like that was one of the things with Barry in Extras was sort of this idea that he'd been in EastEnders and now he was, living in his car, trying to get some, work as a roofer. It just sort of, it's sort of there, but for the grace of God, go us, And but in the end, I hope that even in the stuff I've done, which seems on the surface to have bullying or misanthropy or melancholy, that actually in the end there is normally something good-natured and good-spirited, and that there is friendships and there is the value of kind of love and a good career and warmth, and that's all there. It's just, I like to make you pay for it before you get it,
Sort of speaking about famous people,
Yeah.
in Hollywood you must be surrounded by them. Do you ever feel in a situation when you meet these people that, oh my goodness, it's so-and-so, or...
Yes, of course.
Or have you sort of reached the point where you're now very comfortable?
I constantly embarrass myself around celebrities. I am intimidated by them. I never say the right thing. Years ago, when The Office first happened, I was walking down the street with Ricky, and coming the other way was Steve Coogan from Alan Partridge and all that stuff. And I love Steve Coogan. I think he's a genius. And I was so overwhelmed that he was on the way towards us. And then he smiled at us. I'm thinking, fucking hell, it's Steve Coogan. I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I was thinking, don't fuck this up. Don't say the wrong thing. Just tell him how much you love him, how brilliant you think he is. And I was overthinking it, and I was panicking. And he came up, and he went, hi, guys, I've seen your show. I'm a big fan. I said, oh, thank you very much. He goes, he said, if my career's ever on the skids, I'd love you to do something for me. And for no reason, I said, well, you better get in touch now then. But what? Like, why? I don't even, I mean, there was no reason to say it. I just think I was thinking, like, I'll be cheeky, and we're comedians, and and it just came out that, and sort of Steve just kind of looked like, why would you? And then Ricky's just there as well, thinking, I'm not getting involved. And And Steve tried to move the conversation on, then just kept coming back to it. Sorry, what did you mean? I said, doesn't matter. I'll tell you what, never spoken to him since. But but I was thinking about this recently because I was in America and I was at this party and I saw Paul McCartney walking through, of the Beatles, walking across the party, and I thought, oh, fucking hell, it's Paul McCartney, right? Just don't worry, I'll just walk on by, be fine, don't worry about it. And I saw it, and he noticed me, and he came towards me. I thought, fucking hell, it's fucking Paul McCartney. Now I'm going to really screw it up. What am I going to say? I'm going to say something. I'm going to say, they shot the wrong one. I don't know, something terrible. And I was just panicking so much. And I was thinking, fuck, think of something. And he sort of came up and he went, oh, hey, Steve. And I was like, hi, how's it going? And I think he'd been watching my show, Hello Ladies, because he went, oh, any luck with the ladies? Yeah. And then I just thought, must have a story or something I can tell him. And so I told him this story, which I told in my stand-up, which is a true story, about how I was in Trafalgar Square once at New Year. And there was, I don't know if you've ever been in Trafalgar Square, but there's just this ocean of people in every direction at New Year. It's just kind of crazy. And I'm stood there, and I'm 6'7", so I've got a good view of everything, and I was sort of checking everything out. And I saw this girl looking at me, and she sort of gave me a nod, and I was with my friends. I was like, she's probably seen me on the TV. Give me some room. And she came through the crowd, and she came up to me, and she said, excuse me, are you going to be here for a while? I said, yes, I am. She said, great, because my friends and I have arranged to meet back at you. Which is a true story. And so I told Paul McCartney this story, and it got to the end, and it sort of went silent for a second. I thought, he's not gone for it. And then he started laughing. He was like cackling with laughter. He's like properly chortling. I mean, I made a Beatle laugh. This bloke wrote Hey Jude and the Frog Chorus. I mean, amazing. And then I thought, don't ask me any more questions, Paul, because I got nothing else. I was thinking, move on now. And then he went, anyway, better mingle. I thought, sorry, yeah, see you later, mate. And he went off. I was so relieved. I just thought it couldn't have gone better than I'd hoped. And then later, he was walking back through the party, and I saw him again. I thought, don't come back over, Paul. It's too much stress. And I saw him, and all he did was he sort of walked by, and he went, and he left. And I was like, it was the greatest achievement of my life. But I've successfully had an evening with Paul McCartney, and I didn't fuck it up.
Amazing. Right, we'll take some more questions from the floor. Yeah, just here.
Hi. As a fellow lanky Bristolian, I could really associate with and enjoy Hello Ladies. So I wondered why you didn't go on to make a second or third season?
Well, that was HBO's decision. That their feeling was, we don't know where you can take this. And I said, well, trust me, and I'll take it somewhere. And they went, well, we haven't got much money. So they let me do this one-off sort of film, which I did as a sort of conclusion to it. And yeah, it was fun. It was a shame because I would have had more fun to explore and to get my character into a relationship and to see him kind of managing that. But I'm also, I'm fine. I mean, that's the way that TV land works. That ultimately, all these things are sort of out of your control, and there's always someone else who's writing a check, and so you just roll on to the next thing, really. And yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Shut the fuck up! It is. No, it is. It really is. It's no. Shut up! It is. Yeah. So there's lots of kind of unused sort of dating material that is in the archive that we can use somewhere else down the road. There's plenty more.
And we've got a question just at the back there. I mean, if you want to choose between the two of you, who gets to ask it?
Hi. Obviously, one of the most iconic moments in The Office is when Tim and Dawn finally get together. I was
Spoiler!
Soz, guys. Did you ever conceive an alternative ending to that? And also, particularly at the end of the Christmas special, when what for me is probably like the best moment in The Office, when David Brent finally stands up to Finchy and tells him to do one. Did you ever conceive an alternative ending, or do you always kind of see that both those characters kind of coming good at the end?
Well, it's funny, you were talking about Hello Ladies, and one of the things that was pleasurable about them letting me finish the series with this 90-minute film was that I could conclude the story of that character. And normally with TV, you're encouraged to leave it open-ended so that it can just go on and on indefinitely. And with The Office, because we decided to end it, we knew that we could wrap things up. And that also meant that we could evolve the characters a little bit. Because again, with sitcoms, if you notice most sitcoms, the characters never really change. They have to sort of be the same so that they can be the same for the following episode, and you know, it can go on and on and on. And occasionally they'll do very slight adjustments. They might get married or whatever. But on the whole, the characters have to remain basically the same at the end of the episode. And that can actually become quite frustrating as a writer, because almost no other story does that. I mean, most stories you see the evolution of a character, and that's what's exciting and enjoyable. So sitcom can be quite frustrating. And so with The Office, knowing that we could wrap it up, it meant that we talked a lot about how we could, where we'd like to see these characters wind up, and what sort of optimistic nod to the future could we give. And so it seemed to us that we'd always wanted Tim and Dawn to get together. That was always the intention from the moment that we introduced them. That was not like a kind of last-minute decision. We were always building to that. And with David Brent, we just knew that we wanted him to have a little bit of growth, you know, just that modicum of self-awareness that he'd been lacking all these years, and that would just hint at a kind of more optimistic future. And so by standing up to Finchy, he kind of, you know, it just suggested that this guy he'd once worshipped, who again was a bully and quite a mean-spirited soul, that sort of David had sort of somehow elevated himself above that character. So no, they weren't necessarily always in that form, but the intention of that sense of growth was always intended. Yeah.
Anybody in the gallery? Nope. We will take a question from just here at the front.
So are there any comedians or programs that have you really sort of inspired right now, particularly anything that feels a bit different?
You know, I used to, I mean, we talked earlier about how I was always a fan of comedy and like a sort of nerd about comedy. And in recent years, I haven't seen as much, partly because I don't want to be influenced and accidentally steal material or be jealous because someone's doing something funnier and better. I think Louis C.K. is a master. I think he's an amazing, just an amazing practitioner of what he does. And he's a good example of someone who proves that hard work and experience pays off, because that man was doing stand-up for 20 years, really, before he made his name, and that's a long time. But by God, he was ready when he got his moment, you know. I quite like some of the weirder, odd stuff that you find on an American network called Adult Swim. There's a thing, I think it's called something with Dr. Steve Brule. If you've not seen that, it's John C. Reilly, the actor that you've seen in Step Brothers and stuff like that, playing the most mental, crazy, surreal doctor. He's not a doctor. And I mean, I can't even begin to do it justice, but it's just completely out there. It excites me in the same way that when I first saw Reeves and Mortimer when I was a teenager, that I didn't understand what was going on, and it was really thrilling, and that was really exciting. But I mean, now it just seems like there's just a wealth of amazing stuff. You know, I think Kimmy Schmidt is a good show. I think there's tons of brilliant things out there. I just don't watch enough of it to know what is really good. But I think it's sort of now more than ever is a great time for comedy, because not only are there sort of this plethora of networks and channels, but also like just online stuff. You know, online stuff. There's loads of great people online. It's a great way to get discovered. It's a great way to introduce I often wonder, like, if we did The Office now and we shot it, our sort of own little demo like we did, whether it would have wound up online, you know, as opposed to finding its way to the BBC. So I can't really offer many tips, but it's all out there. It's a lot of good shit.
And a question just here at the front.
Hi. So you've probably been asked this quite a lot, actually, but so Karl's doing Moaning of Life.
Yeah.
Ricky is bringing Brent back. Will you ever get back together and do some more podcasts?
Do some more podcasts?
Yes.
Possibly. I quite like to. I think, to be honest with you, we had done so many of these broadcasts by the time we finished. I mean, you know, we did years on the radio. I mean, every week for years. And then all the podcasts, and they were often like 2 hours at a time. And I think there is that feeling of kind of at some point you're just going to run out of steam, you know? You're just going to repeat yourselves, which I think we probably were anyway. it's funny because podcasts and radio, it really eats up your thoughts. You know what I mean? It really eats stuff up because that's just 2 hours, to speak for 2 hours, like once a week, and keep it fresh and keep it kind of sparkling is tough. So, although it would be fun to all get together and do it, I think possibly it's better to just leave it archived, and people tell me they keep discovering it, and people are still sort of recommending it to friends and listening to it on the train and laughing out loud and looking weird to other commuters. And so, again, that's one of the great things about living in the modern age is that, years ago when I was growing up, if you didn't catch it first time round, it was very hard to get hold of this stuff. And it just, you had to, I used to tape things, when they were on TV because I knew they might not get shown again. Whereas now, of course, there's just everything's there. It just sits there online for sort of ever. And that's great. And I think it's brilliant that people can keep on discovering it.
And sort of a follow-up from that question then, looking to the future, is there anything that we can sort of look forward to seeing you in soon? More writing, more stand-up, more acting?
Well, I've written a couple of screenplays, film scripts, which I'm just trying to finish off at the moment, which I would love to tell you all about. But I think that until the check has been written and the contract signed, I sort of jumpy about it because I'll come back and you'll just say, whatever happened to that thing about aardvarks? It's not about aardvarks. So I did a film earlier last year with Anna Kendrick called Table 19, which is about a bunch of losers at a wedding, all on the same table. So that should be fun. That's quite cool.
I mean, there are lots of sort of stories of you. Well, I think there's a story of. I might be pretending this wrong. You were at a wedding and there was a baby crying.
Yes, that's true. Again, you were talking about whether Hello Ladies was influenced by real stories, but that was another true story. That I was at a wedding, and I had been told that there would be a lot of single ladies at the wedding, and I would be on the table with the single ladies, and I wasn't. I wasn't on that table. I was on a table with some old people who were clinging on for dear life, and this young couple. With a baby, a toddler in a high chair, just sat there. He wasn't wanking, he was just hitting the table. And his mother was the most unbearable woman who just kept saying things like, what's he like? What's he like? And he'd be throwing bread rolls and just smashing plates. What's he like? And she was so insufferable. She was boring as well. She was one of those people. Have you ever met someone who's so dull that if they turn away from you, you cannot remember what they look like? She was like that. And she was wittering on, and at one point, her kid just took off his shoe for no reason, and we were having some soup, and I've been trying to sort of give the eye to some of the ladies in the room, and he took off his shoe, and he threw it in the air. It went flying in the air, and it landed in my soup, which splashed all over me. And his mother said, what's he like? And I said, he's like a cunt. And I didn't get laid that night, but that was a true story that we did in the show, yeah.
So I think we have time for just one more question. Is there anybody? We've got a hand just there on the third row from the back.
Hello. So I've listened to all the XFM shows and all the podcasts, and I was just wondering how much time did you have to put in beforehand to plan for the show, and how much of it was spontaneous, but how much was it pre-written, and also how many of the stories are actually true?
The podcasts?
Yeah, and the radio shows
and the
as
radio.
well.
Well, most of it was true, and that was, like I was saying, that was one of the reasons it was so exhausting, because I'd sort of end up, I'd have funny stories, about being stuck on the night bus or being on a train or whatever, and then I just found myself having to just to go out, and just trying to make things happen, just so I'd have something to talk about. I mean, just taking buses up and down the street in the hope of some weirdo saying something, or, just going on a date and then kind of trying to jeopardize the date to see if there'd be a funny story at the end of it, or and yeah, just the machine of it was just very exhausting. And then we used to sort of, and then you know, people would listen to them religiously, and then we never remembered what we'd said. I mean, we were it was Saturday morning for a long time. We were hungover or whatever, and then people would complain that you told that story 4 years ago. I don't fucking remember what story I told, and so there was very little preparation. We might occasionally say, okay, well, we're going to talk about, like if Donald Trump was in the news, maybe we'd talk about Trump or something. But we almost never planned it because we just found that the most spontaneous stuff was the most entertaining. And certainly with Karl, I mean, he would never repeat something. If you asked him a question, I mean, you just had to wait for the gold dust to spew out of his stupid face. So it was pretty ramshackle, and you can hear it. I mean, it's pretty sloppy. And I always had aspirations when I first started to be kind of more of a DJ, like a slick DJ, and have that sort of DJ voice. Time is fast approaching 11 o'clock. Coming up, we got tunes from Simply Red, Cher, and a new one from Bryan Adams. And I always liked that idea. And then when I started working with Ricky, we suddenly realized that we both tried to do it and both realized that neither of us spoke like that. And we didn't understand why DJs were talking that way and why they would say things like, the time is fast approaching 11 o'clock. No, it's not. It's not fast approaching. It's going at exactly the same speed as it always does. And so we just sort of decided it would be more fun and more real and more truthful if we just made it sound more like this sort of conversation now, like an ambling kind of conversation. And so, yeah, consequently, it was very ill planned. But as I say, also quite exhausting because of that.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but I think everybody will join me in giving you a huge thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Right.